Hi. So to start off with, this slide is not to fool you. I'm not actually a chemist at all, but rather it's to get you to think about the number of medieval chemists who died finding out that mercury was poisonous. Now, this is not to say that I have some secret fetish with the number of chemists who die from chemicals, but rather that they kept all of their information secret. Now, something significantly happened when somebody thought maybe we should publish this information and make it available for other people. Both the mortality rate of chemists went down and the general knowledge of society went up. For a long time, a lot of experts have been keeping information secret. All of a sudden, we moved into a period where people were sharing information. And as a result, we were getting a vaster body of general knowledge. But then we sort of had a slight hiccup and moved back to a more controlled environment as far as information goes when my next slide comes up. And this, of course, was the advent of copyright, brought about because of a number of book printers who decided they didn't want other people printing books that they had an exclusive license over. So they took control of it, said nobody else was allowed to do it, and basically forced government into giving them a range of protections to make sure that nobody else could use it. Now, I'm not saying that copyright is necessarily a bad thing. Copyright is definitely a good thing. It allows individual creators control over their work in order to encourage them and to get them to foster an environment of ongoing creative and scientific endeavour. The only problem is, in the 80s, when a number of large corporations got control of it, we moved away from protecting artists to an environment where you can't control or touch anything, where large multinationals tell you whether or not you can do anything. Now, this created a rather significant problem as far as particularly the creative industries, but no, anybody wanting to be able to use content. Now, a number of relatively unexciting law academics got together and said, well, we need to find a way to break down the permissions culture, which is where Creative Commons comes from. Basically, the idea was that there are still people out there who want to share content, who want to make it available and want other people to be able to reuse their stuff. But they don't want to give up everything. They don't want to just let them have a free-for-all and do whatever they like with it. So they came up with Creative Commons, or the Some Rights Reserved system. Basically, the idea is that you can allow people to reuse your content for certain purposes, whether that be for remixing and adaptation, or whether that be for distribution and copying. But that you can reserve other rights. So the idea is that some things are permission granted. You don't have to come and ask me every time that you want to do it. But everything else, I'm retaining the rights to, and you've got to come and get permission. Now, copyright law and law in general is pretty boring, so I'm not going to spend too much more time on it, except to say that the idea of Creative Commons is that there's a number of different options, and that individual creators choose whether or not they want to apply this. They answer a number of questions on the website, and they generate a copyright license that will let them share their work while still retaining certain rights and protecting themselves. Now, I don't really want to go into too much detail, so I'm going to tell you a bunch of stories about what people are doing with it. This is Robert Greenwald. I don't know how many of you know him, but he's a filmmaker and documentarian, and he made a film not too long ago called Outfox, which was basically about proving why the Fox News network doesn't live up to its own tagline of fair and balanced. But of course, to do that, he needed to rely on a large number of footage owned by the Fox News network, which they just simply didn't let him have copyright to. Being critical of somebody who does that. Now, he was so perturbed and put off by the problem of copyright that he decided he didn't want to continue the problem and released all of his own original footage under Creative Commons. Now, next story I want to tell you about this guy. This is Trent Reznor from 9 Inch Nails. Most of you will probably remember his Fuck the Record labels rant at Sydney late last year. Basically, he got the shits with how things were happening in the record industry, with record companies owning everything, and decided that he was going to go out on his own. So he released this album about 6 months after leaving Interscope Records. This is a Ghost 1 through 4, which is 4 EPs made up of 9 tracks each. On the website, 9inchnails.com, he was selling this album, but also giving a free download to the first 9 tracks. While that album was available, this is the second album that he put out under Creative Commons called The Slip. Since releasing both of these albums, the band has grossed about $1.6 million in direct sales, none of which has gone to a record label, and even though they're releasing their content for free. it does prove that you can actually make money by giving your stuff away. It's just how you control it. The next story I want to tell you is about this place. This is the National Library of Australia. They run a number of archives, including the Picture Australia photo archive. Now, they got really concerned about 2 years ago that there wasn't enough contemporary photography in the archive, but the problem was that clearing the copyright, the time, effort and money involved in clearing contemporary photography made it really, really hard for the National Library to afford and be bothered doing it. So what they did was they teamed up with Yahoo's photo publishing website Flickr, and they created a number of groups on the website which encouraged people to put content out under a Creative Commons license, which meant that the National Library already had permission to archive it. If you put it into those groups, it was automatically indexed and hosted within the archive. More recently, they started releasing a number of public domain works from a number of different collections from around Australia. That one was from the State Library of Queensland, and they're encouraging people to adapt them and remix them and create new works out of them, all of which are becoming part of the archive. Now, the last story I want to tell you is about somebody who I guess is somewhat more recent. When the slide clicks over. It's about this guy. This is, of course, President-elect Barack Obama, who has just made the decision to release the change.gov website, which is the transitional website from the previous president to Barack Obama under a Creative Commons license, and in particular to release it under the most open and permissive license. So hopefully signs of where people are going to go in the future. Woo!